Thank you. Hi. If you don't know me, my name is Molly Wellmann, and I have a company in Cincinnati called Wellmann Brands, and we do bars. Sorry. How many of you have I made a drink for? Yay. Oh, good. That makes it feel so much easier because I've all talked to you then. How many of you have been to one of my bars? Awesome. If you haven't, I have 3 bars right now. I have Neons, I have Japs, and I have the Old Kentucky Bourbon Bar. And I have 2 more in the works in Cincinnati. One up in East Walnut Hills called Myrtle's Punch House. It'll be open sometime in the fall. Everybody asks, when is it going to be open? And then another one that's an event space in the Central Business District on 4th Street called the Hearth Room, which will be an event space. And that will be in the fall as well. So I got started doing this about 4 years ago. Actually, I got started making cocktails about 6 years ago. And then decided, since I was doing all these weird, fancy cocktails that not a lot of other people were doing, I would just open my own bar. So I wouldn't have to get in anybody else's way or have to deal with somebody else's concept. Concept is a very important thing with my bars and with my brand. I believe that every ounce of you has to go into that brand to make it something that becomes a legend. And I'm all about creating a legend. I always feel that I'm the queen of my own kingdom. And I always tell people, like, you are the ones that can create anything. So every ounce of that has to go into my brand, which goes into the bar, which goes into every cocktail and everything that we do. So with each concept, I try to put in something that creates a legend, which is heritage. Heritage is legend, I think. Do you think so? This is something that needs to, it needs to be something that will last for time and time and time, and something that people will look back on and be like, oh, you know, I remember my grandmother talking about this a very long time ago. She used to go to that bar that girl with all the tattoos owned. I think it's very important, but it's also very important not just for the brand, but also for the community and the city. Everything that you do, from you waking up in the morning to what you decide to have for breakfast, what you decide to wear, where you decide to go, all matters in heritage. Does that make sense? Creating something from the things that you do from the present time you do it. And I believe in that every day. From the time I wake up, what I wear, who I talk to, what I say, how I plan, the events that I create with my brand, they all go into the brand. And I'm always thinking of how will this still be around or talked about 100 years ago? Every ounce of it. And I encourage everybody else to do that as well. I couldn't find anything like that in the city, and that's why I created the brand that I did. You all have the power to create something that no one else has. And I think it's really important, and it all goes back to creating a really cool community and a great city. And that's something that I'm a big part of. So with Wellmann Brands, I wanted to create bars that had longevity, that had a solidness to them. And I think I've done that. With Japs, we make these classic cocktails. Classic cocktails, some of these they're back from the 1700s. Cocktails from the 1700s. That's so cool to still be drinking something that somebody was drinking in the 1700s today. I think that's just really, really neat. and there's a solidness to that, you know? Everything to the brands that I pick to put on the back of the bar. I encourage my bartenders to know about those brands and the stories in order to talk to you while you're sitting there having a drink and you're relaxing, so you can have an experience that you'll remember for a lifetime. And that creates heritage too. Isn't that neat? I just love that, don't you? With neons is another thing too. We call it OTR's back patio. You know, we open that up so that people in the city would have a place to come and hang out, have a beer with neighbors and friends, bring your dog. And it's worked. It's been wonderful. And there's memories created on that patio. And I just love that. There's a solidness to it. We do a lot of beer. I don't know, you guys have been to Neons? If you haven't, you should come by sometime. It's beautiful. Remember, like, we have brands that we pick that we try to promote to help those brands to become legendary as well. The whole thing about the brand is creating an experience and creating legend. At the Old Kentucky Bourbon Bar, that's the story of Kentucky. The Old Kentucky Bourbon Bar is in the Main Strasse district over in Kentucky. And if you haven't been there, how many of you like bourbon, first of all? Oh, good, we can be friends. That's cool. If you don't like bourbon, come and see me. I can, get you into that. Bourbon, I love bourbon. It's my first love. I love it so much. I'm not a lush. I don't drink that much. But I love the stories behind bourbon. I love how bourbon and whiskey have created America. I love telling those stories. I love turning people onto it. It's not just, oh my gosh, it's very high proof and it burns. Once you start to taste this and you start hearing the story and you start understanding the brand and how different it is from other whiskeys, it's actually really neat. And again, it creates an experience for you, an experience that you will remember forever, which in turn, thankfully, will help my brand last for time and time again. Kind of neat. At Myrtle's Punch House, what we're working on is something kind of modern, but yet with history. Punch, a lot of people think, they're like, punch, what's that? Punch was something that was very popular from the 1600s all the way pretty much into, 21st century, the 20th century. It's changed a lot. There's over 500 years of recipes. Some of them are kind of weird, like the curdled milk ones, I'm not gonna serve those. but the way that they changed the way that people drank, the way that people associated with one another is what I find so fascinating about a punch bowl. I really want to create a place in a neighborhood that is up and coming, that has so much potential and has this amazing community. I want to create a place where people can all gather. And the first thing I thought about with what I do with cocktails and drinks and spirits is a punch bowl. People would go to taverns and people's houses, and the first thing that they would be offered is a cup from a punch bowl, or from a punch, a community bowl, a flowing bowl. I find that to be so important when you have a neighborhood. I always read about community and taverns and all kinds of history and stuff. And the one thing that I learned was that you need two things to create a good community. You need a church, and there's already a church there. You need a tavern. A tavern for people to meet and the community to come together. And that's what we're trying to create with the Punch House. It's a neighborhood bar. You can get a beer, you can get a wine, you can get your usual vodka, soda, what have you. But there'll also be that aspect of a punch bowl. And if you come with a bunch of your friends and you want to share that, you share experience. You share a drink, you share experience. There's another thing about that too. You've ever noticed when you come to one of my bars, not Neon's, but Neon's is different. You come to the Old Kentucky Bourbon Bar, you come to Japs, you come to Myrtle's. I don't have TVs in my bars. When I first opened Japs, I was like, no TVs, no TVs. And everybody's like, you will never make it, Molly. You will never make it unless you have some sort of entertainment where people can watch sports. I'm like, no, 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 no. I'm going to create an environment where people can communicate and focus on one another. That creates experience. That creates memories that last forever. And that's very important. You will forget what you watch on ESPN if you're sitting there, drinking a beer, drinking, a cocktail. But you will always remember having a conversation, or meeting a new friend, or meeting a new lover, or meeting, someone face to face. You will always remember that, and that will stay with you from time and time again. So it was very, very important for me to make sure I created a space where all people could come together and socialize face to face. That's what the bars are about. That's what my cocktails are about. That's what every single thing I put into every little aspect, every little procedure, stirring the drinks, the theater behind the bar, the knowledge of what we have on the back of the bar. I always say I want to introduce something new for you to want. That's very important for me. Always creating this world, I always say, like I said, I'm the queen of my own kingdom. I'm the queen of my own life. And I can do whatever the heck I want. But it all goes back into the brand. And I'm very passionate about this. I'm very passionate about Wellmann brands. I'm very passionate about my bars. I'm very passionate about Cincinnati. And this is my way to give something to the city through cocktails and through bars. Anyway. Oh, I thought my time was up. That's on. So with that, I plan to do more in the city. I always say that you need to, if you have a business, you need to make sure you pay attention to the community as well, and that's very important. There's a lot of startups, and I'm starting to see and work with many different companies and people, and I see this a lot. It's not just about, hey, open up something, sell it, and then close your doors and go home. It really is about going out there and doing things with the rest of the community in the city and coming outside of the brick and mortar and showing what you've got and showing giving life to the city, giving character to the city. Do you know what I mean? I do a lot of things outside of the bar. A lot of people are like, Molly, when are you going to be behind the bar? I get to behind the bar as much as I can. That's my first love, is being behind that bar and being face to face with everyone who comes in and explaining, my love and passion for making a cocktail and then making it and seeing the look on their face. That is what gets me up in the morning. That's what I strive for every single day, is seeing somebody happy and comfortable and relaxed. It's the end of your day, you're having a cocktail, and all your inhibitions are slowing down, and the stress is melting away. There's a smile on your face, and I love that. That's my favorite thing. But a lot of times I have to bring it outside of the bar, So I go out and I work with different companies. I've made a lot of cocktails for LPK. I've made a lot of cocktails for so many different companies. It's not even funny. And I just absolutely love it. Can't even tell you, like every day I have to wake up and pinch myself and say, is this really happening? It's really, really neat. Anyway, that's all I have to say. Thank you very, very much, and I hope to see you all behind the bar. Thank
you. Hey, this is kind of cool. We've never started a morning like this here at the brewery before, so everybody's walking in and looking at me like I'm crazy and trying to figure out what's going on. I know the theme is heritage. We obviously have a lot of that naturally built in here. I was thinking originally about talking about the great heritage in the brewing industry here in Cincinnati, but kind of figured there's 5 books written about that, and you guys can look that all up on the internet. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about my story, how heritage inspired me and how kind of Cincinnati's inspired me. I bounced around. I was born in Denver, grew up in New York, over time moved to San Francisco and LA, and wound up in Cincy. The quick explanation of that actually routes through Brazil, which you can barely see this picture over here, but that picture's in Búzios, Brazil. So I'll get there roundabout. So in New York, when I grew up, I was kind of like a artsy math nerd, but always loved business stuff. So the first thing I ever did was I used to go to the Ocean City, Maryland, and I'd see the guys at the boardwalk airbrushing t-shirts. And I thought it was the coolest shit ever. I thought it'd be the best thing in the world if all I could do was like airbrush big bubble letters with people's names on them and like palm trees all over stuff. And so I actually saved up my allowance for like 2 years and did all these like side chores for my dad at $2 an hour, picking up sticks and raking leaves, and bought some airbrushes and started airbrushing t-shirts, motorcycles, hockey helmets, just about anything you could come up with. And found out that I just like loved both running my own little business and producing things that I could see and touch and, you know, see that made other people happy. And so I knew then, I was like, I don't know, 14, that running my own business was what I wanted to do in life. Went to college at Cornell, got a degree in some completely unrelated stuff called biometrics that I still not sure quite what that is, but has absolutely nothing to do with lattes and beer, but was kind of a fun pursuit. But opened a business in college called hungrytime.com. I was a little bit ahead of, I think, where online ordering food is now. I was sending faxes to people's fax machines in restaurants when those still existed, and using that for people to place online orders for food around college campuses was a cool endeavor that completely failed, other than like you'd go walk around campus and everybody would be wearing Hungry Time t-shirts, which I thought was cool. But same thing, was doing these like math classes, but doing business stuff, and realized I don't really want to go be a math professor. I'd much rather do things that are tangible, even if I manage to screw up a bunch of them along the way. And not knowing what to do next, I left college and went into business strategy consulting, and moved to Manhattan. Had them sending me all over the country to work on projects for other clients, and sort of used that as an avenue to try and discover what I liked in other businesses, management styles, organizational structures, and just, you know, people's attitudes, trying to figure out what I could get excited about in life. And as I was doing that, what I realized I could get excited about in life was going on vacation. And I went on vacation to Brazil. We went down to Rio, and it was like the best place in the world. Just a wonderful culture, beautiful place. I fell in love with it. But it was also right at the time, call it like 2005, where new president had gotten elected there, and everything was starting to change economically. And I was the sort of weird entrepreneurial guy combined with one of my real estate friends and one of my friends in finance, and said, let's go buy some stuff in Brazil and open a business. And we realized pretty quickly we couldn't afford to buy anything in Rio because it's really expensive. And we also didn't know the dynamics there. It was a huge, scary city. And so we found a city called Búzios that was more international, further isolated from the crime. And we were going to try and open this luxury bed and breakfast in Búzios, Brazil. Look up Búzios when you get home. It's awesome. It's like the French Riviera of Brazil. This peninsula that juts out an hour and a half northeast of Rio, and there's all these different alcoves along it. They did something really cool, and this kind of relates to heritage. They wouldn't let anybody build above 2 stories. So kind of like Cincy's done a really good job of preserving all of this old architecture, and that's what lends this special beauty to the city. Búzios is like that, but in tropical paradise. And you can't build above 2 stories, so you can see the full landscape. You can be at the beach and look all the way up into the hills. You can be at the hills and see all the way down to the beach without some giant Hilton getting in your way. So we were going to build this luxury bed and breakfast there on the beach. It was going to be beautiful. And spent like a year and a half trying to pull it off, and it fell through at the end. But we got so far along that I ended my lease in Manhattan and like spent forever trying to learn Portuguese. Was literally like ready to move to Brazil when the thing fell through. And so me, my girlfriend at the time, my best friend from college, all said, well, let's just go move somewhere else. And so we moved to San Francisco. We'd never been there before in life. Just sounded like a really cool place. Not Brazil, not New York, a little different, you know, has some scenery, landscape, and a bunch of cool entrepreneurial people. And so we jumped. We took one trip out there, never came back, found a place to live, and kind of loved San Francisco, but started to try and process, you know, what should I do next? I need to open my own business. I'm sick of doing consulting. I want to do something that, again, is tangible, like the good old airbrushing somebody's motorcycle helmet. And I had met a bunch of people in the coffee industry down in Brazil and tried to figure out a way to involve that. And initially I was looking at trying to coordinate farmers and just do importing here in the States. But at some point said, you know what, why don't I just open a coffee shop and start roasting my own coffee? And that was the game plan. But didn't want to do it in San Francisco or New York, where there's a ton of competition, costs are really, really high and prohibitive, and used my wonderful consulting tools to actually benefit my entrepreneurial gene, and used them to do location analysis and try and figure out where's the best place in the country I can go and start this coffee roasting business. And believe it or not, Cincinnati was pretty damn close to the top of the list. So it actually wound up being between Cincinnati and Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina, places that were seeing a lot of economic growth, places that had where lease rates and real estate were both available and inexpensive relative to the income of the population, and also relative to New York or San Francisco, and where competition was just at the right point, and where it was sort of set to rise, you know? And the downtown here is what really struck me. Raleigh-Durham doesn't particularly have a downtown as much. It's more based around the college campuses and the Research Triangle. Here in Cincy, we had this downtown, and you know, I wasn't here for the bad parts of it, but when I came in, it was like, something's wrong here. There's still a ton of people working down here. There's a bunch of young, you know, hip folks who, and all the restaurants and bars are like generic chains, and there's not a lot of local flavor. And this was seven and a half years ago. And so I opened a company called Tazamia, opened a bunch of coffee shops, closed a bunch of coffee shops, managed to sort out how to make a business work and how to screw one up too. But that was sort of the point, right? Like, if I did this in San Francisco for $600,000, I could open a coffee shop and have enough capital left in the bank to survive 6 months if I managed to make some bad decisions. Here, I could open a bunch, try a bunch of different things out, and you know, it's, despite my mistakes, it's still enduring, and it's been 6 years. And that has been an incredible amount of fun as an entrepreneur, to learn what I'm capable of, to learn I can mess things up and still be alive at the end of the day. But also to jump into a city like Cincinnati and watch it get behind what you're doing and get excited about it. And that was, once that started to happen, I was locked in. You know, I was a Cincinnatian at that point, and will be forever now. But so I'll explain the other stuff up here. So somewhere in the mix of all that too, when I moved to Cincinnati, I also got involved in the spine industry and medical devices, interbody fusion devices for spine, if anybody's ever worked in that field. But helped a group develop an interbody fusion device from a drawing on a napkin to an actual real tangible thing, and we sold it off to a medical device company called Alphatech, and it's cool. People are getting it implanted in their spine and walking around better now. But that was like side stuff, but I think it speaks to kind of my broader outlook at life and what's going on, and always keeping my eyes open for fun opportunities and things that intrigue me. So after Tasmania, the stuff that started to really intrigue me was what was going on in Over the Rhine. I had moved downtown. I was living above Righteous Room. Never do that. It's a terrible idea. It's loud as shit, and the whole place shakes. It's not soundproof. Bad idea. So, but I was living in downtown for the first time in Cincinnati, and I was captivated because I could feel the energy and I could feel things changing a lot more tangibly than I could in my first few years here. And you could see a level of excitement around, the entrepreneurial community, around the food and beverage industry that reminded me of being back in San Francisco, but was completely new and different because for Cincy it was like building a new foundation for what the city's going to be for the next 100 years, and everybody's rallying around it. And what started going on in Over the Rhine really struck me. And so I was looking for a way to get involved up there. We did a small stint with Molly at Japs, which was fun. She probably hated it because I was really shitty at making cocktails. Made a really big mess all the time. But then opened a place called 1215 with a friend of mine. And that was sort of like the tweak of how do I get involved in Over the Rhine, spin off my coffee business, but make a way to keep it functioning throughout the day because there's not a lot of daytime traffic, there's a lot of evening time traffic. So it did a little twist on that, added a bunch of wine. And after doing that, it's like, man, this is growing faster than I can even keep track of. I moved out from above Righteous Room, moved into Over the Rhine, and then really it was like every day I'm seeing new faces, and in addition to this sort of like core group of really fascinating people who were driving the force behind growing, Over the Rhine and this culture like Molly. I mean, it was being right in the heart of it really inspired me with new ideas. And one of those was beer. So despite my advice on not living above Righteous Room, I moved above the Lackman, and it's soundproof though. It's nice. And but I'd go downstairs to the bar, and there's 16 taps there, and there was like one local tap. And having lived in places like San Francisco, there'd be 14 local taps and 2 non-local taps. And we're sitting on this incredible amount of history in Cincinnati in the brewing industry. And to not have a lot of local beer just seemed backwards. And it seemed like ripe time to change that. And so my initial idea was somebody needs to open a brewery. I don't necessarily want it to be me, but somebody's got to do it so that I can go downstairs to the Lackman and I can drink good local beer. And so I started trying to connect some friends. I started doing some research in the industry and trying to convince other people to go do it, basically. But the more research I did and the further I got involved in it, the more I realized this is going to be awesome. It's going to be super fun. It's like a functional, actual business model, despite the fact that it looks like too fun to be a functional, actual business model. And I can't imagine something I'd rather do with the next 20 years of my life. And so I jumped in. I called a buddy of mine, Brian. Some of you guys have probably seen him. He's kind of hard to miss. Really tall, lanky dude, all over Cincinnati, seemingly. And him and I used to do consulting together out in San Francisco. And we both jumped ship at the same time. So instead of actually doing consulting, we basically just spent the whole time strategizing on how to jump ship and go do really cool shit. And we decided to, one really funny anecdote is we literally used to have these dinners at my house in San Francisco where everybody would have to bring different IPAs and we'd blind taste them before we ate and kind of talk about what we liked, what we didn't like, vote on them, and that was sort of the beginning of this. And then after dinner, I'd go and make like 37 lattes for everybody and test them on a bunch of different coffee roasts. And so that was like the beginning of all of this. And then we jumped ship. I got into coffee, and Bryant left and got into beer. And he went and worked for a company called Dogfish Head, most of you guys have probably heard of. And he started their West Coast sales and ran it for the entire West Coast right when Dogfish Head was growing from a company like the size that we are now to the company 10 times the size of this that they are today. So I called Brian up on his birthday and convinced him to take a trip out to Cincinnati, not thinking I'd actually be able to convince him to move, but knowing I had some sort of shot. And he came out, said, yeah, whatever, I'll help you build a business plan, but no way I'm moving to Cincy. And this is how most of my friends are. Most of my friends are like, still used to think, at least a couple of years ago, that what the hell is Bob doing living in Cincinnati? They had the old perspective of this is like, it's that, old Midwestern town, there's not a lot going on, he's out of his mind. And they've all made trips. Bryant was the first one to make the trip and come visit, and just fell in love with it. I can remember we were sitting at a tavola and we saw Molly there, and that was like the tail end of a day where we had walked into this space and it just like struck us. Yeah, that sucks that I need to get like something to cover this so that we can see things better. But I mean, this space was kind of the same. We didn't build any of these giant concrete arches or anything. We put in all those gigantic tanks back there though, and painted that mural. But I mean, it was the same bones, the same structure. And we came in, walked up those stairs the same way everybody else does from outside, not thinking we'd see anything like this. And stepped in and we just kind of looked at each other and we were like, uh-huh. And by the time we left the building, Bryant went from, yeah, whatever, I'll help you build a business plan, to like, all right, so when we do this, and when we do this, and went back to San Francisco, broke up with his girlfriend, and moved out here to be with Bob and live on my couch. And it was pretty great. He moved out, literally was living on my couch for like 3 months, and this is kind of a funny story that relates to, I think, how the city is embracing what's going on. So we needed money, right? Like, we're starting a business where tanks are giant and made of stainless steel and cost a lot of money. We're going into a gigantic space that needs a good amount of work that costs some money. And I had like, I don't know, $60 in my bank account from struggling through coffee sales for 5 years. But we started with the approach that probably most people do when they're trying to start a business, and that's, well, we need money, let's call all the people we know who have it. And that can work sometimes, but at some point we had this epiphany of, instead of just like talking to random, lawyers and doctors and friends of ours in New York who can't see this and don't understand what we're trying to do here in Cincinnati, let's find people who would actually get this vision, who also happen to have money. And so I'm not a hoarder in general, but I kind of hoard newspapers. So I'm still one of those weird people that gets the newspaper delivered every day. And I read all 7 pages of the Inquirer every morning. And but I keep them in a stack behind my desk. And when we had this epiphany, I went newspaper diving, and I started pulling out articles and people that inspired me and people that I thought would get this vision. And I'll give you an example. Jack Rouse was heading the group that was trying to renovate Music Hall and pull together like $100 million to do that. And he also owned an awesome creative architectural firm in the same building where I had my coffee shop. And I'd never met the guy before in my life. And I thought, this might be a guy that would be into this. He obviously gets the vision of the history of Over the Rhine. He's, spending his retirement days trying to raise this money for Music Hall. He's gonna get this. And I like cold called him, cold emailed him, and he actually responded and rolled up to our first meeting in a Harley and a t-shirt and sat down, and at the end of the meeting he's like, yeah, I get it, what do I need to do? I'm in. And it's like, oh shit, that actually just happened. And it was like, wow, we're 1 for 1 with this strategy. I'm going back to the newspapers, and found a couple other folks right in that realm. One of them's the CEO of one of your big branding companies, who is also a great mentor to us. I leave his name out of stuff because I don't know if there's a conflict of interest there. But you know, just another example of the people who get branding and get Cincinnati want to cultivate talent here, right? That's sort of the other side of this, is like not just wanting to cultivate these buildings, but people in your fields, in the creative fields. I mean, you're selling people, right? I mean, you're selling your guys' talent more than you're selling a product. That without that talent, you're never going to get to the branding that is, you know, core to everything that goes on at a Landor or an LPK or any of those companies. And so I figured those guys would get it, right? Because they need these people who love this sort of cultural stuff, you know? And this is the sort of stuff, the stuff that Molly's doing and the stuff that's going on here, and even like the Washington Parks, and those sort of civic and cultural things are what make people actually consider living here instead of in San Francisco. And so we called up a few more of those people, and they got the vision. And so we went like 3 for 3 with those sort of people who really understood what we were trying to do. And with that, we, you know, found some of their friends, and before we know it, boom. I mean, it was like, once we did that, it was like 3-4 months, and we had this thing financed, and we were rocking. Took about 6 months to do all the construction. I was the general contractor, which I wouldn't recommend ever doing in your life, unless you know a hell of a lot more about like plumbing, electric, and HVAC than I do. But learned a lot, and managed to get something together that makes beer. And so this is the before picture, and you guys are sitting in the after picture, so I probably don't need to show it. But but it's been crazy. So that was a year ago that we opened. Literally, this is like, we just had our year anniversary party a few weeks ago, and it's been an insane year. We're 5 years into our plan, a year into our business. What's been most amazing to me is how much the city's embraced this space. You know, I was talking to some of these guys before this and saying, like, we thought we'd have about 50 people a week come in here. And on our opening night, we had 2,500 people come through that Saturday. So it actually all started, we had Molly's birthday party here right before we opened. That was like the beginning of the magic. And then, but then when we opened, I mean, we were like, we didn't know what to do. We were just shocked. So after we finished being in shock, we just started brewing as much beer as we possibly could. And kept adding tanks and adding tanks. So now we have a ton of really big, gigantic tanks back there. We have more coming that are even bigger and more gigantic. But we're brewing, this year we'll do, or in this first calendar year, we'll do about 12,000 barrels, which is a lot of barrels. A barrel's 2 kegs, that's like 24,000 kegs of beer. It's a lot of beer. And it's just been so cool to see Cincinnati rally behind this. I mean, we knew the city was thirsty. We knew it was a city that had all this beer heritage, but it's like it really survived. And it survived like those centuries, and now it's coming back. And that's been something that we really, really never anticipated. All right, a few more things, and then I'll shut up. So one of the other cool aspects of Cincy and heritage and everything that's happening here is the fact that we're now all, I think, attracting people from these other cities. You know, Bryant was my first example, but we have a brewer that moved here from Michigan, a guy moved here from Indy. We have, if you guys have heard of the Venture for America program, we hired 2 Venture for America fellows. One from San Diego who went to Harvard is coming here, and the other from Connecticut that went to BC is coming here. And you know, these are people that came, visited for 3 days, saw what was going on, understood it, and were like, yeah, this is a place I want to be. And I think that's really inspiring for the future here. You know, I think it's the mix of people that all grew up here and have built like the foundation of awesome, friendly, smart, creative folks that are here, mixed in with people with all these other perspectives from all over the place that really make a city thrive. And I think we're getting to that point where that's really happening, and that's I think that's what's going to create something really special in the years to come. I think my what's next for Cincy type thing is, we got places like Stone looking here to build a brewery. That seems crazy, but that's awesome. I'm a guy who owns a brewery. You'd think I wouldn't want a company like Stone to come here? No. That puts this on the map on such a broad level. They come here, that makes a mark. Nationally, internationally, everybody'd be like, Cincinnati, that's badass, And there's so many good buildings, and people would all of a sudden be taking trips, and it's already starting to get there. But I think stuff like that, the fact that that's even in consideration right now, there's no shot that'd be happening 6 years ago, 7 years ago. So I think there's been so much change in such a positive way that things like that are starting to happen. And I think, there's this, the one way I've phrased this before is it's like real life Sin City. If you have really great ideas right now, you can make them happen in Cincinnati, and you can make them happen a lot more readily than you can in other cities. Just like our story, the city's here to rally around it. People are accessible. I can call up the CEO of whatever company, and even before I started this, and I didn't really do anything that cool. They'd take my call, they'd spend an hour with me at lunch, and that you can't do that in Manhattan very easily. So there's something really special right now where the city is all here, all rallying behind this, and I think it's something all of us can take advantage of. I think that's about it. Thanks. Sure.
We've actually got some free stuff to hand out to the first handful of people who want to ask questions. So fire away.
What was your experience with brands for before you started making your own, and what was the most interesting part about making your own brand design?
Can I go first?
Sure.
Repeat the question.
Yeah, she was asking, what was your experience with brands before this, and what sort of, inspired or helped with your current brand designs? For me, from a consulting perspective, it was for a lot of bigger brands like a Coca-Cola, where there's so much organizational, corporate-y structure around everything that you do that it's just infuriating. But that have built really, really powerful brands. So on one hand, there's admiration for something they've done that's so iconic, but on the other hand, it's like, I want to be able to influence things, and I can't influence this, so this is no fun. And so going into our own world, I think the learning from that was simple and iconic. Simple and iconic makes a ton of sense, not overcomplicated. We're in a beer market where you can walk into the Party Source and this shit'll give you a headache because it's dizzying. There's so much stuff, and a lot of it is really busy. And so our whole goal was keep it simple, keep it iconic, and we actually, even with the advice of one of our mentors who's an investor here, decided to go with a firm called Helms Workshop in Austin, Texas. Mainly because we put together this deck of all these brands that we admired across industries. There were brands in the beer industry, there were brands in the coffee world, there were brands in the wine world, booze, whatever. But two of the ones that we admired most were done by Helms Workshop, especially this one called Austin Beer Works. And so we called them up, Christian Helms picked up the phone, and it was like, I like that. Dude who owns this place is picking up the phone. And getting our story and going back and forth with us. And we knew we were in good hands and worked with him to do the design, but now we work with a lot of the local guys to get more of our one-off design done. But I think the simple, iconic, bright colors, clean logo, it speaks well on a crowded shelf.
So the inspiration for Wellmann brands was, one, I'm a woman in a male-dominated industry, big time. And I wanted to make sure I had a brand and a logo that had a bit of femininity to it, but yet was extremely strong. So that's what it came from. It's something about that. I used to hate my last name, and now it's my brand name. Isn't that weird? When I was in high school, I was like, Wellmann, I can't wait to get married. But as I grew older, I also thought, I'm the last of my generation. I'm one of 3 girls in my family, and this is where the name Wellmann ends, So I'm not going to let it end. So that's where that came from. So, and then with all of the bars, it's more about each name has something to say about the bar. Jack's, the whole big hair store, has the name. Neon's the whole time. Myrtle's, it's on the corner of Woodward and Myrtle. And we also thought it sounded like very comforting that you're going over to your Aunt Myrtle's house, like hanging out. So that's where that came from. So we can kind of think those things through, where it's going to be the Wellmann brand's feminine and strong in a male-dominated world, and then the bars speak for themselves to give it identity. So, good question. What about you? Can I go for it?
Sure.
A vision. Yeah.
What advice would you give somebody that has a vision or an idea or hasn't yet brought it to life? Bring it to life. But in short, I'd say, I'd say in short, I think the big thing that happens a lot of times in those cases, it's like this black box, and you don't know how to attack the black box of, what the hell do I do now? I have this idea. I think, I've done stuff in a bunch of different industries, and what I've always kind of thought is, well, you only don't know something because you haven't learned it yet. So just research, go figure it out, talk to people who are doing the types of things that you want to go do, and you'll be amazed by how much people will be excited to help you. And even if it's people who aren't particular to your exact topic and your idea is super, super unique, find the closest things. Call the people up, shoot them an email, figure out, how they got it done, and ideas will start to tick. And there's a lot of great resources here in Cincinnati to, in addition to just figuring out whatever industry it is and furthering that idea along, in terms of building business plans, building financials, getting funding. I mean, reach out to like the Brandery guys, or give me a call. And people here have been through those steps, are more than willing to help you get through those steps, because I think we all want to see more creative ideas turn into real businesses here in Cincy.
Jump. Have no fear, jump. You never know what can happen. Live in the present and take every day one day at a time. Wake up every day and wonder what's going to happen, and get excited about that. Don't wake up with stress like, oh my God, this. Jump. Do it. You never know what can happen. If you fall, you'll get back up. You will. It's not going to happen. It's not going to kill you. We've both fallen, So,
Still doing it.
You're stronger and you learn from your mistakes. So have no fear. Do it. Like you do. I'm going to pick you in the purple, and then I'll come back to you. Yeah, a quote.
You can go first this time. Good.
So she has, is there a quote or some kind of inspirational quote? I would say I want to introduce something new for you to want. That's my goal every day. That's what I think every day. Usually what I'm doing is I'm introducing something that's old, but it's new to you. A new experience through a cocktail. That's my meaning. So creating something new for you to want. That's what I think of every day.
Rather than a quote, I had a book really inspire me in college called Atlas Shrugged. It can be a bit polarizing, but the core philosophy, I mean, is really like think for yourself and pursue your happiness, you know? And that really struck me. I was like, you know, I've been trying to figure out where my head's at, and that's it. I mean, especially thinking for yourself, like, it's just not, you don't need to follow a path in life because that's what's been like preordained. You can think and then, you know, figure out what makes you happy, and you can always move closer to that. I think in this life you're going to spend a lot of time working, right? You might as well be doing something 8, 10, 12 hours a day that makes you as happy as the stuff that you're doing the rest of the day, if not happier. And so that's really inspired me and stayed an inspiration for me since college.
It's one of my favorite things. It's one of my favorite things about this, that you have your own business and you never work. It's awesome.
It's true, I just drink beer all day. I can't hear you as well as she probably can, so I'm going to have her repeat it and then...
Do you ever get paranoid about letting too much information out about an idea you have for starting a new business? A little bit, but you know what? It's so funny. It's like you find out that you have this idea, and you have an idea, and you're like, oh, I've got this great idea. Like, I was discussing this with my boyfriend, an idea again. He was like, there's a great idea. Somewhere, somebody has already done this. It really isn't just... Like, you think, like, nobody's ever done this before. You go back and you do some research, and you find it. And it is sometimes a little heartbreaking, but the thing about it is that when you put your individual mark on something, that's when it's new. No one can steal you. No one can steal that soul and that character that you put into something, you know? There's people who make beer, right? But no one makes beer and has that mark like Reinhardt does. Everything that goes into it. I was talking about making all the cocktails. People make those cocktails all the time, but until I put my mark on it, or I talk about it, or I talk about my experience with it, or put that into it, then it's new again. So, not really, a little bit, but not really. Yeah, not really. You back there.
Yeah, I'll do this one real quick too.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
No, that's
never
okay.
mind.
Because I have a weird perspective on this too. Because for me, it's really differed by industry, right? So in beer, yeah, people have made beer before. Truth is our IPA. People have made IPA with the same exact hops that we use in our IPA. We're pretty open about the hops and the ingredients that we use in our beer. You know, she's pretty open about what she uses to make an old fashioned. It's everything else that goes into it that makes it unique. But in like the medical device industry, yeah, where if somebody found out the way that device articulated that inner body fusion device, then a company like a Medtronic, who dominates that industry, has a whole team that they dedicate to A, researching, and B, finding out what other provisional patents are out there, and then figuring out how to work around them with a better idea. So you got to cover your ass when you're doing something like that is really proprietary versus something like this where plenty of people make beer. You're a good question getter.
You guys are favorite drink?
Yeah, go over.
So, I'm pretty simple when it comes to cocktails. The question was, what's my favorite drink? So I researched thousands of drinks all the time. But you know what I drink mostly? I drink beef eater martinis on the rocks. Isn't that funny? That's what I drink. I drink that because my family has drank, my grandparents, my aunts and uncles, like growing up, they would always have a beef eater martini on the rocks, slightly dirty, and they would always put 3 olives in there. My sister, my cousin, and I would go around with each person with a martini and would steal their olives. And so there's almost a nostalgic thing for me. And now when I go and see, hang out with my dad, or when I used to hang out with my grandma, I would always have a martini with them. I still do. So that's my favorite drink. I love it. How about over here?
I'll start with style of beer, I guess. So she was asking me how we decided on our styles of beer, and then she was asking a different question for Molly. We were really, I mean, this is sort of the West Coast inspiration after spending all those years in San Francisco and having IPA dinners where we had everybody bring different IPAs. The styles out there are very dry and aromatic and hoppy, and that's something I've always loved. It's kind of like parallels in coffee and wine. You know, I love really dry, acidic wines, and I love espresso, which is, you know, it can be an acidic, slightly bitter beverage. And so that parallels over to IPAs and more hoppy styles of beer, and also really sessionable styles of beer, I think, is something that the industry started to migrate towards heavy, like 12% beers, which I don't particularly love, and neither did Brian. And what we do love are beers that are quaffable, beers that you can go drink 6 of at the ballpark. And so, you know, we started making beers that are like under 4% and under 5%, and those are a fun balance for the hoppiness.
She asked me about how I got my backing started at bars. Well, for a while I was jumping around from bar to bar to bar, guest bartending. I'd pick a night, they put me over in the corner, I'd bring all my syrups and everything in a cocktail list, and I would guest bartend at any bar or restaurant in Cincinnati that would let me behind their bar. They're like, there's Molly over there making her fancy cocktails over in the corner. One day I did that at Neon's, and the owners of Neon's, 3 guys who I'm now partners with, approached me and said, we want to open a bar with you. And at the time I was writing my own business plan. I hate writing business plans. So I said, awesome, do I have to write a business plan? He said, nope. And I'm like, I'm in. Let's go. So that is how I got started with my partners. They wanted to open a bar. They wanted a concept that I had, and so I partnered up with them, and it's been awesome ever since. Luckily, they like bourbon, so we get along really well.
Thanks.
What are you going to do to a 12-pack or a case so I can have more beer at one time instead of just 6-pack?
When are we going to move to a case of beer so that he can buy more beer at one time? I like that question. We only have that at a few places. It's kind of up to the places that sell it. So I think Costco will sell you a case. I'll sell you a case. Or a keg if you want. Yeah. Just see me when we're done. We're good.
How about you with the straight phone? Yeah, me? Yeah.
This is about the craft beer industry. Three of us are from the flavor industry, and we're seeing a growing trend with some of the other breweries using flavors in their beer. How do you feel about that? Do you think it's a lasting trend? Do you think it's actually considered a craft beer that has flavor?
That's a good question. So they're coming from the flavor industry and asking what do you think about using flavor in beer in the craft industry? And to each his own, I guess, is my thought. You know, it's still craft beer if you throw some flavor in it, I guess. It's no, but and if people like drinking it at the end of the day, then that's good, right? You know, I think that's really what this is all about, is to make things that people enjoy. So if people enjoy it, awesome. Here, we're a little less into it. We are doing some interesting like bung-sided keg beers where we'll throw in, you know, tangerine peels or tea or coffee or whatever, but less just straight flavoring. But that's just our philosophy and our brewer's philosophy.
Let's go over here.
So since everybody in this room is, I'm assuming, kind of in love with Cincinnati right now, I want to know what's like the thing that you most recently, besides your current businesses, that you guys have gotten like jazzed about, or you think we need to know about, like person, place, event that you think we need to know about in Cincinnati.
So many.
Like give me one.
I got a quick answer.
Yeah, go for it.
So my quick answer, there's a place, so living in Over the Rhine, there's so much good food, but it's like, it's a death trap health-wise. So, you know, like my Sunday routine, it's like I go to the Eagle and I get some fried chicken, and then I go to Grater's and I get ice cream, and like, it's awesome. Food's delicious, but this place called Happy Belly just opened right across from Kaze on 14th and Vine, I think that is. And it's actually healthy stuff in the area, so it's nice because I can go balance out the fried chicken sandwich with, you know, like a fruit shake that makes me feel like a normal person. Oh, sorry.
The question was, what are some new things besides our own businesses that we get excited about in Cincinnati? There are so many. Every day I'm like, oh my god, we're so cool. Recently though, I don't know how many this is or what, but I discovered this rooftop over at Phelps, and they'll probably kill me for it. It took an hour to wait when we went there. It was absolutely gorgeous. It's over by Lighted Park. It's a hotel there, and they have a rooftop deck, but it's very hard to do. But when we get up there, we saw how amazing our city is. It gives me chills just thinking about it. I didn't want to leave. They kicked us out because they closed early, but it was gorgeous. It almost made me want to cry. It was so pretty. So I really like that, I think, for the summer. Let's do you in the red shirt, and then I'll get you in the red shirt next. Is that cool?
Yeah, I love this trend of heritage cocktails. Is there maybe an example of, well, could you tell me, one, how you find these classic drinks, and two, maybe you have an example of one story of a drink that you love the history of it and the story behind it?
Oh gosh, that's a lot. So he was asking how I find like research cocktails, and then maybe one that I have a story about. I have a story about all of them. You know, I read cocktail books from before Prohibition, cover to cover. I read everything about them, and a lot of the recipes are redundant, but they're still interesting. It's interesting to see how during the times they've changed, and the way people would find the recipes would be like somebody who was traveling and be like, have you heard of this recipe? There is one cocktail that I've been drinking, making a lot lately, and sort of, it's called a Martinez, and it's a very old cocktail from the 1850s. It was created in San Francisco at this hotel called the Occidental Hotel. And it was basically where a hotel close to where the ferry boats would go to take, passengers to different parts of the Bay Area back in the 1850s. You got to think about this is the gold rush, So this cocktail is pretty much the great-grandfather of martinis.
You said that very seriously.
But it
You said that very
started out
seriously.
using gin, and we used an Old Tom gin, which is a sweetened gin, sweet vermouth, and Maraschino.
I was really shitty at cocktailing. I don't remember. That's why I got fired.
It's maraschino liqueur, which is a cherry liqueur. And it's absolutely beautiful. It's light, it's gorgeous. It has just enough sweetness, but it's not too sweet. I don't like make, I always say it's sweet enough. I don't even make the cocktail sweet. But it was first made at this hotel, and it was named for a gentleman who lived in Martinez. He did really well in the gold rush, and he would always pay a little gold nugget. It was always such a cool thing. But it's what evolved into what we know to dry martini today. I love the idea of having something that evolves like that. It's really cool. So, yeah.
They said this one's the last one.
All right, the last one. Put you in the red shirt back.
So we get drunk. So he asked what how we come up with beer names. Well, usually starts with drinking. Sometimes it's just us. It's a fun culture in here. We have 30 of us now, and we goof off a lot while getting a lot done. But in the office, I mean, somebody will say something funny, and we'll be like, "Oh, beer name," right there. We tried to get more strategic with it when we were leading up to opening the brewery, but literally the stuff that came about that's good was just random, fun conversations. I mean, truth is probably the only one that's like a serious word, I guess, but it really cut to the core of what we were all about with the West Coast style, really dry, hoppy IPA. Cougar and Uncle and Panther and stuff like that is just playful, fun. And we really like the just one simple word. It, kind of goes with the iconic stuff. And it was also, we picked a German name, right? So we were a little worried. We came up with Rheingeist early in our getting drunk and texting potential names back and forth. But then we kind of skipped over it at first because we were like, too German sounding. But we wanted something that correlated with what we were doing with the German heritage of Cincinnati. And there was a bar called Zeitgeist in San Francisco that we loved too. And so we came back to the name and we said, screw it, we're sticking with it, we keep coming back to it. Let's just make sure that our branding and our beer names are very clearly modern American stuff so that when this is sitting on a shelf, it's not like everybody thinks it's Weinstefaner, That's about it. Yeah.
We like it as bar. We like that as bar owners too, because it makes it very easy when somebody's ordering a beer and they're like,